Right to respect somebody, it's a right on its own. Right to dignity, it's a right on its own. And there are certain rights within the Constitution that can actually be taken away or be limited in terms of Section 36 of our Constitution, but there are certain rights that you cannot take them away. The right to education is Section 29 in our Constitution, whereby it talks to your code as well, to say what is expected of you as educators, and what does the Constitution say when it says learners have a right to education. And the right to education is a socio-economic right. Other rights, like I said, they can be limited, but the one for education, you cannot. The difference between such a right, for an example, the right to health or access to housing, there is a little bit of some difference, though they're all socio-economic rights. In terms of housing, that is why sometimes people will go to government and say, we've got a right to shelter. But then say the government should be seen to be providing that, provided there's budget for it, provided there are resources for it. So there is some kind of limitation to say, yes, you've got a right, but then the current budgetary situation is not favorable in that all of you ought to have houses, but in future we'll work towards that. But in respect of children having to go to school, it's compellable. It can only be limited under justifiable and reasonable reasons as to why a child cannot go to school. So the debate of not going, it's much stronger comparatively to say a child ought to go to school, because we know for a fact that number of schools now, kids, they don't have to pay for fees. So it's something that is of ethical value that as educators you need to understand that it's not just a choice of the community having to bring their kids to your care. It's fundamental. So there is a difference between fundamental rights and all that. And then the preamble, there's an emphasis in that continuously we ought to advocate the emphasis of the right, but bearing in mind that there are responsibilities. Now, when we talk about the right in having to access, I know somebody will be talking, and this morning certain things emanated, whereby as an educator or a principal, you need to guard against your interest vis-a-vis the community and the learner. Sometimes some of the children, they're unbearable to take care of in schools. They are danger to other learners. How do you handle that? Then an ethical and integrity way of doing it, it's important. Whilst I'm addressing that, I think it's important again to bring it home. There was a recent incident in our televisions where we saw a domestic issue moving towards the school and moving towards the community because we failed to handle conflict. The example, the Mboro matter, yes. We have seen it on television. Yes. It's a personal issue that involves learners. It involves a father, a grandfather, a grandmother. I don't know much of the story, but I know for a fact that the mother of the learners passed away. Seemingly the granny was taking care of the learners. And the father needed access to the kids, or either he wanted custody. And in a domestic point of view, there are rules that governs to say who has a right to be in custody of a child. When the biological father, for an example, he has more rights comparatively to the grandmother. But maybe the court has actually ordered contrary to say, no, you can only have access to your child, but the grandmother has custody. But because at family at home, he could not reconcile of the order of the court, I'm not too sure what's the content of the court order. I'm just assuming or speculating. It could have been suggested to say, prior to the departure of the mother, the children were always at the care of the grandmother, so you don't qualify. Maybe morally that's what they think, but the court could have said, no, the father has actually a custody comparatively to the grandmother. So those are other dynamics. But now look at the journey as to how the whole thing boomerang. It started at home. These family members, they had their own relationship. Then it's back to such an extent that our own learners, in thinking they're resolving the conflict, they tend to go and burn the assets. So that's an ethical, moral, and a value system that we have in our communities. Obviously, they were exposed to danger in one having to have dangerous weapon. And the teachers were exposed to that. It was out of their control. They didn't know how to intervene. So the kids, they felt that, no, our educators, they do not have authority or power or capacity to will handle it. So that's a moral fiber we have in our societies. Was it a correct intervention? Sorry, it wasn't a correct intervention. Because it seems like now, when we can't handle issues as principals or as teachers, then we're saying to the little ones, you go handle it, because they have set the trend. The precedent has been made. It's a value system. Are we breeding kids that they do not have conscious in terms of moral? Are we breeding young people that don't have a value system to say, you don't interfere on an aspect that you don't understand what it's all about, because we don't know the other side of the story. So those are moral, ethical issues as to how you deal and handle and think about the conflicts that we have in the schools. Now, let me just move, because it's a lot, we will have time to talk about these things. The essence then, in terms of professional integrity and the ethics, the core is integrity, ladies. Before you act, you'll have to think. Creative thinking. The design in your mind. What are you thinking as a leader? With an integrity being central. From your thoughts, what becomes your expressions? Because what leads to you having to express what we are thinking, there should be an integral part of integrity in it. The other one, how do you then act? You're a principal, you've got resources, there's monies that you have petty cash, you have a need at home, because we all have challenges. And when we are exposed to resources, and not any other member within the governing body or at school or your management have knowledge about the money that you have, you decide to say, I'm going to make use of it just a little bit, then I'll cover it at the end of the month. Start a little bit, because you think it's ancient. And you know for a fact that, yes, this is a school purse, you're not supposed to have access in it. But because you are exposed to it, your mind says, I've got a personal need and I need to address it. You take an action in having to take the money. Now challenges accumulate because you have taken from a kitty that does not belong to you. Then it gets to be a habit. And then you might replace it, and then there'll be time to say, okay, nobody saw me because we don't have any accounting records. I don't know if principals, they do have such monies in their possession. So because they don't account to anybody, but they're said to be the accounting officer. You take this little money, you do whatever you have to do, you win, you come back. Unbeknown to you, the district wants accountability. Please show us the books. Then you are found wanting. And you may find that the money that you have just taken is so little comparatively to the first that you have taken, and you replaced it. Then you are compromised. It's an integrity issue. And nobody's going to trust you any longer, because now you'll be mumbling in having to account and to explain, to say, what did you do with the 5,000 that was in a kitty, for an example? No, I use it for myself. The trust is gone because of the thinking, because of the agency, because of your circumstances. So it's very important that you need to draw the line to say, there are certain things that I can do, there are certain things that I cannot do. Besides the access to finances, your actions as an employee at workplace, it's important. We've got time. Sometimes we are done with your syllabus. Your kids are fast. You know, they can do things quickly. You've got all the time. You'll always have reasons to say, I don't want to be at school for the whole day. You can dodge and have reasons to say, I'm busy with this. It's totally unethical. Because you are assigned to be at school. And you knew that these hours are reserved to be at school. Meaning that your presence talks to productivity. Whether you have an activity or not, anything could happen in your classroom. Kids could fight in a classroom. How do you then account? It's an integrity issue because you won't have any explanation. Do you want to be in that compromising situation? No, you don't want that. So it's an issue of a social behavior that necessarily is covered by a code of conduct and ethics. It's a pity, ladies and gentlemen, that Our society has moved to a situation whereby we are now highly regulated. It's like as people, we need to be regulated. And it's sad. We don't want to be regulated. Nobody wants to be regulated. One will question to say, but why do we have so many criminals and accused persons? Because there are regulations. Because we don't want to be regulated. And if the society is not behaving accordingly, then you will be regulated. You are regulated at school, you are regulated outside, you are regulated at home. It's not a healthy lifestyle. It's because we do things contrary to what is prescribed to actually happen. The importance of professional integrity. Integrity is one of the most important attributes in a leader. A number of people, I see the program, they're still going to talk about the leadership. You can't talk leadership and not talk integrity, because that's what makes a leader. It doesn't matter situational leadership, it doesn't matter different types of leadership. I think we're still going to learn about that. But it's very important that the issue of integrity is imperative. So the importance of it is employee satisfaction. To say you go to work because there should be results. You go to work because the society has expectation of the impeccability of your presence, because we know they have commodified you. We know that you are being paid. But what are the results thereof? It's a pity your functions as principals and educators, everybody has binoculars. In particular, at the end of the year, we're looking at the results and we're very quick to blame the principals and we're very quick to blame the educators without understanding the process that they go through. But to avoid that is just to respect the process. You might be getting good results, but if you don't respect the process, then you will be compromised in one way or the other. To say sometimes other educators, because they want to be seen to be excelling, they do compromise the marks of the children. They don't get to finalize the syllabus. Then they're quick to look at Sfiso to say, Sfiso is good, I'll give him 8, I'll give him 7, because they want to be seen to be proper. But then when the child reaches grade 11 or grade 12, they can't perform. Then you question to say, but when you look at the past, this person has been performing well. It's because you have actually compromised the process. But then you'll sit and keep quiet. But if there was serious analytical assessment in terms of projection of a child, it will be easy to check and to find that there was a compromise in terms of the performance of the educator. Uncompromised principle I've indicated to say, please, don't compromise them, because in one way or the other, they'll catch you, and you don't want that. You don't want to go for unnecessary labor dispute. You don't want to go for mediation. You don't want to go for arbitration, because it's little things. It's things that you could have avoided. Not being in school on time, that's important. Reputation. It goes a long way. You don't pay, you earn that. And that's you having to regain your reputation. One mistake, they know you in the staff room, you have done A, B, C, and D, you are gone. How do you then go back and build the reputation? So you get to be compromised on that. Clear focus, the lady talked about this morning, to say as a leader, if you want your subordinates to understand and to follow you, you need to have a clear vision. As a principal, you are in leadership, governing body, where are we heading to? So if people understand that, it's not easy for them to compromise the process, it's not easy for them to compromise the integrity and the reputation of the school. Positive outcomes. It's easy to get the results, but respect the process is very important. Maintaining integrity, treat everyone the same, reward honesty, admit your mistakes, encourage teams to speak freely, because those are other issues. When people fail to talk in the boardroom, they're very quick to talk in the corridors. And the discussions that normally happen in the corridors are very dangerous, because decisions can be taken which are going to compromise the majority. But as leaders, allow people to speak. The person might not be appealing to you, but because we are not discussing individuals, we are discussing the vision. So any input or suggestion, you need to take it with an understanding to say everybody's here to play the role. So we should stop personalizing issues. I think it was said this morning. Keep to your commitments, put it in a maximum effort. That on its own, it makes you to go and sleep at night. Because you know for a fact, when you do a mistake, whether it's seen or unseen, you're not going to sleep peacefully. You'll always have this conscience to say, I've done something wrong. You can always tell the principal to say, I'm booked off. You go to a mental psychological institution. It's not because really you are sick. The thing is you are just perturbed, you don't want to be there. And you only think for yourself. Here you have medical aids, you've got all the time, you've got leave days, but then you are compromising the majority, the society, because of your own behavior. You might be having a conflict with your manager or your HOD. Then you get to lie about it to say, I'm sick, whilst you know you are not sick. So that it deals with the conscience and what type of a person you becoming. So it's very important to say, let's avoid things that are going to cause burden. Because it's not only about work, it's about you, because without you, there wouldn't be any work. So you are a whole as a person. Let me move to the other one. I've defined what ethics. Ethics is the branch of philosophy that is concerned with human conduct, more specifically behavior of individuals in the society. The relationships that I spoke about, educator and the community, educator and colleagues, educator and the learner, parent, profession, and the employer and council. The emphasis with council, I think I'm making reference to SACE because you are members of SACE. Yes. And there is a code of conduct. So you need to respect that. That's the regulatory body for yourselves. One mistake, you act contrary out of the system. And it's your own actions. But it takes that, please, have a relationship with this code. Read the codes. If there are directives being issued, if there are bulletins being issued, because I know for a fact there's quite a number of them, read them, get to understand what is happening. Because you cannot come back later and say, oopsie doopsie, I did not know. But there is a directive because you chose not to be interested. You might compromise the majority. The educator and the community, I think I cannot emphasize much. A lot of people have spoken about it this morning. Heading towards my last aspect. Integrity, stroke, moral values, it depends what you call it. Professional integrity is the practice of maintaining ethical values and principles professionally. It is an act of being, like I said, it's just you being a person. You need to be honest, guys. It's very important. I know it's not easy. In our fraternity, within the legal sphere, they're very strict when it comes to ethical issues. They're very strict when it comes to honesty, being trustworthy, because we find quite a number of lawyers. They have things that they call the trust accounts, whereby they get millions and millions in their account. And you get tempted because sometimes you may see that your practice is not doing well, but you know for a fact that you've got somebody's millions in their account. It's easy to go to that kitty and take the money. And should it be found, I mean, you listen to television, you see a number of lawyers that are being struck off. It's because of the temptation in them not knowing how to be honest with themselves. Because if your situation says, I do not have, please live without. Yes. Live without. As soon as things get to be better, then you'll have access to your resources. You can't afford to lose the profession. You struggle as a lawyer for years to build a practice. Then a little thing, you take somebody's money, then you're out of the system, then how do you survive? You can't come back. And this is the only profession you have. Who's going to take you because your name is tempted? So we need to guard against those things. And I suppose it does happen within the principal sectors because you are in possession of these things. Respectful towards others is very important, whether they're young people or not. One typical example might resonate, especially with the female educators, the dress code. We see social medias. We see things whereby the principals, they don't have authority to go to a female educator to say, but ma'am, I don't think you're dressed up appropriately. She'll tell you, but it's my right to dress the way I dress. It's not about my dress code, but it's the content that I have. What am I disseminating to the learners? Failing to understand that education is not only the content that you give or a theory. The kids, when they see an educator, they see a whole being, a person of integrity. Teachers are of integrity. Principals are of integrity in our communities. So these are the dynamics that we have as a principal to say, but how do I approach this person? Because they've got the right to choose, they've got the right to be themselves. And I'm quite content to be the way I am. How do you deal with an issue? Do you go around gossiping? Do you run to the district office? But as a leader, you need to address these dynamics. But we need to do them with dignity, without humiliating the particular person. Then the person will get to learn to say, but I'm a bit different compared to others. So these are social dynamics within our communities that as much as there is an emphasis of rights or the emphasis of people being themselves, the element of democracy is got an issue of having to compromise our morals and our cultures. Because people, they've got rights. And when they acclaim that they've got rights, they don't talk about the responsibilities to say, as much as I do have a right, but I need to exercise a responsibility. So it's a very thin line to say, please do it, confront them, but confront them with integrity. So it's not only about what you say and what you do, it's about how you confront the situation without humiliating one another. In closing, let me go to the last one. How do you maintain professional integrity? Maintaining professional integrity is crucial for building trust, like I said. As a principal, when you deal with an educator, they need to have that trust. They need to have that independently. They need to have this thing to say, if I confide certain things to you, I'm confiding to you. It's not something that you're going to drink tea and have lunch with your other favorable educators. So respect is very important. A few steps that help you to maintain professional integrity are establishing a clear ethical standards. Have your own, as much as you can have your own code, but in your school, you can have your own code of conduct. You can have your own value system, you can have your own culture, to say whichever educator that comes into the school, this is what we subscribe ourselves to. So you are allowed to do that. As much as you are allowed to do it, but please make it a point that it's not in contrary to the Constitution. Because anything, any legislation, any piece of code or conduct or standard, if it's contrary to the Constitution, then it's unconstitutional and it's totally not acceptable. So guard against those things, but you are allowed to do it because it takes a level of practice. It's a pity that we need to be taught how to behave. It's because of all these social dynamics that we have, but you are allowed to do that. So in closing, Program Director, I could be longer. There are certain pointers that I took during the day whilst the other speakers were talking. The social support and psychological support. I thought it was important when it was raised, I think, by the lady from Vuma. I think she's gone. In that, ladies, you may perceive that your functions are within the schools. They're not within the schools. You are the key agents of change within our communities. I think the other lady talks about the calling, in that being an educator is not something that you go and get your degree or your diploma and then you become a teacher. Well, some of them we know for a fact, especially the young one, is this desperation of not being employed. So the easy avenue is to go and do teaching, whilst you know for a fact that it's not their calling. It ought to be a calling because you deal with sensitive human beings. And you're not only dealing with the learner, you're dealing with the mother and the father. You're dealing with the community. So you need to have that power in having to manage these people around you because we all have expectations to the educators. But please don't underestimate your value. Don't underestimate the role that you are playing within our societies. That is why people will perceive you as social support and psychological support. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Advocate. We really, really appreciate that.